the world system has things that are part of it that make it up, such as lust of the flesh, appeals to this fallen, broken nature. Lust of the eyes, things that look good or look beautiful in various ways. And as we said in our first day, the boastful pride of life. We're going to come back and we're going to touch on this in more detail today and hopefully help us understand a little bit better about what this means. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher. We're looking at the ministry of the Spirit in the life of believers, and that ministry of the Spirit, one of the things he does is he produces in us love as part of the fruit. That love fulfills Christ's command, or should be used to fulfill Christ's command, to love other believers. But sometimes, because of what happens with the world system and its appeals, we end up doing what? We end up appealing to these things. We end up chasing after and loving this kind of stuff. And John says, don't do that, because you can't be loving this stuff and be loving God at the same time. What does he mean by this boastful pride of life? We've talked about this word alonzania before, that it has to do with this arrogant boast or this making false, exaggerated claims for things. You know, this product here, it'll fix your stomach ailments, it'll fix your feet, it'll make you regrow your hair. And that is one example from the time of the New Testament where this word was used, and it was used of people that did that. And we're going to look at a couple of those examples. But the word also could be anything. The way John is applying this word in this context, it's anytime that you focus on the things of this life and you make some arrogant claims about this. That would be alonzania. And it's not appropriate for you as a believer. And yet the world wants us to chase after, this stuff over here. Why? So that we can do exactly this, so that we can make this exaggerated boast and make everybody awed and impressed by what we've accomplished in the world. James chapter 4, James says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will travel to such a city and spend a year there and do business and make profit. You don't even know what tomorrow will bring, what your life will be, for you are like smoke that appears for a little while and vanishes. You're like a vapor, a little vapor in the cold air and it's gone." Your life is very transient. And our lives as Christians are in God's hands, but the point is, you make plans without ever talking to God about it, without ever really determining it's what God wants. That would be independence from God. That would be in a temptation from Satan. It's a temptation of pride that basically says, well, you can figure this out. You don't need to talk to God. Of course you can go do business. But you ought to talk to God, because you ought to be able to go to God and say, hey, is this what you want me to do? Do you want me to do this thing? He said, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, if he desires, we will live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast. And now this word boast is our word kakamai, and it has the idea of to make just a regular boast. And it's used in Scripture in both a good sense and a bad sense, but it is a boast. But you boast in the CSB translates as arrogance, and that's our word, alonzania. It's in these things that are braggadocious. They're the things that are uncertain, unsure. These things that, how do you know that this is actually going to cure baldness, male pattern baldness, and straighten my teeth and give me fresh breath? How do you know that? You don't. You have no idea, but you hand the money over to these people and they take it from you. Well, when you go off and you make plans without God, it's kind of doing the same thing. Oh, I can do this. I'm smart. I know how to run a business. I can set up a business and we're going to be successful. And you don't know that you will be. That is a rather boastful, arrogant claim. And he says all such boasting is evil. It's evil. Paniros evil that he uses here in the Greek, it's paniros because it spreads. And it spreads because when other people hear you boast on what you're going to do and what you can accomplish, other goes, yeah, there's no reason for me to be sitting around here, not making good money. I'm going to do that too. And people go off and it spreads and infects others in this. In fact, he actually says in verse 17, so it is a sin for the person who knows to do what is good and doesn't do it. And what is that? Keep that in the context. The person that knows to consult God about his will, but he doesn't do it because he's just like, I can figure it out for myself. He's acting in pride. That's what he's doing. Making plans. It's not just that he makes plans, but he actually goes off to do it. Because sin is always going to be in action. And so we have a couple of examples of this where we have the word translated boastful in both places. In Romans chapter 1, verse 30, it's in a list of people, the kind of character that man developed outside of God, that as man fell and God was doing nothing to restrain him. God had been restraining man in Romans 1, but 3 times it says, and he let them go, and he let them go, and he let them go. They just pulled and pulled at that leash and finally let them go. And these are the things that they become. And one of the things that became characteristic of them, they became those who are boastful, those who have made these exaggerated claims. Verse 2 of 2 Timothy 3 for people. And he's talking about in the future. And these are not people out there in the world. I think that's a problem we always read this, where we think, oh, it's the world out there. But he's telling Timothy, these are the people you're going to find in the church at times. For people will become lovers of themselves, lovers of money, and they will be boastful. They'll be making exaggerated claims. This has gone on all through the history of the church. It was obviously a problem Timothy had to deal with way back then. But boy, I tell you, with the advent of modern media, where we had television and radio, and now we have the internet and all of this, you can listen to people that can stand up in front of audiences of thousands or millions and make these incredible, boastful, exaggerated claims. And claims about themselves. I've actually listened to people that have made these claims that God can't do anything down here unless I give him permission to do it. Yeah. I've actually read and listened to people make those ridiculous claims. And they're claiming to be ministers of God. How about that? That's an extreme example of boastfulness. But let's go and let's kind of flesh this out in terms of what could this actually end up looking at like. And in 1 Timothy 6, and we've been here before, verse 17, he says, instruct or charge those who are rich in this present, it shouldn't be world. It's actually our word aionios, which we'll eventually look at, but it's not the word world. The rich in this age, not to be conceited or high-minded, but to fix nor to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches or on uncertain riches. We've said this before. I don't care what you put your money in. Most of us do not have safes full of gold and silver, or for that matter, cash. But even if we did, even that itself is uncertain riches. Most of us have money that's just out there in the ethereal cloud that our bank tells us we have this much or our broker tells us we have this much. But all of that, it's a real interesting picture that those are uncertain riches. But anything is uncertain. Anything you hold on to as a part of life in this world is uncertain. And for us to stand there, and I've listened to people that have done this that said, man, we put it and we became successful and we've got all of this and look at our wealth and look at our beautiful this and all of that. And all of that can go away very quickly. All of that can disappear overnight. And you have now made these exaggerated claims about things that in reality are nothing to exaggerate about. But, and I want to come back and look at this in more detail, he says in verse 17 of 1 John 2, the world is passing away. See, that's why it's a ridiculous thing. It's always changing. It's always in flux. We'll come back and deal with this more. And also its lusts. But the one who does the will of God. And what would be the will of God in this context? To love other believers. He lives forever? No, it's not lives. It's meno over here. He abides or is at ease, literally, into the age. In other words, with all the change and flux and all of the ridiculous stuffs that the market's up, the market's down. Gold is high, gold is low. Oh, oil prices are high, oil prices are low. Housing market is out of sight. You know what I'm saying? I'm going on. I don't need to go on. You get the idea. It's always changing. And if your life is based on that stuff, you're going to be, oh, man, I don't know what to do. But if you're loving other believers, that never goes out of style. If you're loving other believers, you can be at ease into the age because it's always appropriate. There's never a time that loving the believers, that's a popular thing to do now. Oh, wait a second, loving believers, oh, that's so last year. Never the case. It is always appropriate to be loving other believers. You want to live in agitation? You want to live in panic and then invest your life in the world and its things and the things about which you can make arrogant, ridiculous boasts. But it's all transient. It's temporary. There's a good chance it may not even be here next year. You never know. But if you want something where there's stability and there's an ease, there's the ability to relax, love other believers. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great day in the Lord.